truth. And today, well, we're dissecting a really contentious local issue.
That's right, down in Florida.
The escalating battle over paid parking. It's happening down in Fernandina Beach, Florida.
Yeah, and this is way more than just, putting coins in a meter.
Oh, absolutely. It's like this perfect storm, isn't it? You've got municipal finance, desperate finance, trying to fund improvements, colliding head-on with constitutional law claims, and wow, huge citizen opposition.
It's intense. So our mission today, really, is to look at the city's actions, specifically approving this big contract.
For the parking revenue.
Exactly. And contrast that with what the citizens did immediately after, or even before.
The countermeasures, we're talking a major lawsuit and this push for an ordinance to just ban it?
A prohibition ordinance, yeah. They're using legal and legislative tools.
And the sources we have are pretty revealing. We've got the official city resolutions, the actual contract details.
Details are key there.
Excerpts from the lawsuit the citizens filed, which was framed as an emergency.
Which adds drama.
And maybe the most critical thing, evidence showing the city just didn't seem to know who actually parks downtown. A huge blind spot.
Yeah, that demographic piece is fascinating.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So where did this whole paid parking thing really start? Let's look at the city side first, their official reasoning.
Okay.
It wasn't just out of the blue. It seems it was formalized back at a goal-setting workshop February 27th, 2025.
Right, so there was a plan, or the start of one.
Yeah, and the driver was clearly money. They identified paid parking as basically an essential alternative funding source.
For what specifically?
Those capital improvement projects they needed to finance but were, overdue.
Got it. So classic municipal funding gap problem.
Exactly. And once they set that goal, well, they didn't waste much time.
They moved pretty quickly, issuing that RFP request for Proposal 2505.
Right, for parking management services.
They got 7 proposals back, interviewed 3 finalists.
So a process.
A process, yes. And then the City Commission adopted Resolution 2025-142 on August 19th, 2025. That awarded the contract to One Parking Inc.
Okay, so contract awarded in August.
Yeah.
But the approval of the contract terms, that came later, right? November 4th.
That's correct. And that's where we see the actual financial commitment. It was a 4-to-1 vote.
And let's talk about that commitment, because this isn't one of those deals where the vendor takes all the risk, is it? Like revenue sharing.
No, not at all. This is different. The city agreed to pay the vendor One Parking.
Pay them how much?
$323,568. That's the figure for the initial 2-year contract period.
Wow. So the city is paying out over $300,000 up front, basically betting on future income.
Precisely. It's a significant upfront investment based on projected revenue.
That seems risky, especially given the opposition.
Well, and the politics get even more interesting when you look deeper, specifically at the termination clause in that contract.
Ah, the fine print. What does it say?
It's fascinating, actually. It builds in protection for the vendor against that very public opposition.
How so?
See, the city knew. The citizens were already working on that initiative, the one to prohibit paid parking.
The referendum effort, yeah.
So the contract states, if the city has to terminate the deal during the first year because that citizen initiative succeeds, then the city owes One Parking a hefty severance. We're talking 90 days of the manager's salary, plus 30 days for each enforcement officer.
Wait, hold on. So the city built in a financial penalty for itself.
Right.
If the voters decide they don't want paid parking.
That's exactly what it looks like.
Is that just covering the vendor's cost, or is it designed to make it really painful for the city to back down no matter what?
I think it functions as a powerful lock-in. It shields the vendor from the political risk, and it makes it way more expensive for the city commission to just say, okay, public wins, we're stopping this. They basically wagered on pushing through.
Wow. Okay. So they're locked in financially, or at least heavily incentivized to stay locked in. What about the timing of actually starting it?
Right, because the contract approval on November 4th wasn't the final step for implementation.
It was conditional, wasn't it?
Conditional on the actual implementation ordinance passing, and the city, well, they delayed that final vote until December 2nd.
Okay, Dick's second for the final ordinance vote. So when could parking meters actually start running?
The absolute earliest date for enforcement, according to the sources, would be January 6th, 2026.
January 6th, okay.
But this decision to just push ahead towards that date, it looks even riskier when you examine the financial basis they used.
The revenue model.
Exactly. The whole justification for this $323,000 contract, this whole big project, it rests on only 2 parking space occupancy samples.
Sorry, did you say 2? Like the number 2.
2. Just 2 data points.
I have to push back on that. That can't be right. How can you justify a multi-year, contentious, expensive contract based on 2 samples? What kind of financial risk does that even create?
It creates huge systemic instability. I mean, statistically speaking, a model like that, it lacks a mean, it lacks a standard deviation. You can't account for volatility.
So they have no real idea how much money it will actually bring in. No confidence interval.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And here's why that really matters for their stated goal, funding those capital improvements.
Okay.
A financial model this shaky, it's highly unlikely to meet standard municipal bond underwriting standards.
So they can't even get the funding for the projects they wanted this for. Not based on this model anyway.
Not immediately. They'd likely need to collect maybe a whole year's worth of actual data first, then revise the model, then maybe try for the bonds.
So they're stuck paying the vendor $323,000 for potentially a year just to collect data, hoping it proves their guess was right.
It essentially makes that initial vendor payment an expensive gamble. A gamble on eventually getting the bond rating they need down the road.
Okay, so this is looking messy. Flawed data, risky contract, huge upfront cost, and we know there was massive public opposition.
Overwhelming, according to the reports. Ignored during the contract vote.
So how did the public react when the commission voted 4-1 to approve this contract anyway?
They reacted fast. And legally, with immediate surgical legal action.
The lawsuit.
Yes, just days before that November 4th contract approval vote, apparently on the Friday before the Citizens Committee served the city.
Served them with the law for it?
Yes, filed as an emergency temporary injunction, clearly trying to stop the signing before it happened.
An emergency injunction? What were the grounds?
Well, the legal arguments aren't minor stuff. They're hitting hard, using federal law to defend individual rights.
Like what?
The citizen's attorney, Scott Kennelly, he laid out arguments about violating Florida's Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
Okay, state level.
And, critically, the Federal Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, RLUIPA.
RLUIPA. Isn't that usually about zoning, like building mosques or churches?
Often, yes. But here, the argument seems to be that forcing people to pay for parking imposes a significant financial burden, a barrier, just to get to their place of worship downtown.
So it impacts access to the churches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which they argue also potentially bumps up against the First Amendment rights of assembly and privacy. You're basically charging a fee to exercise a fundamental right.
That's a serious challenge. How did the city react in that meeting when the lawsuit was brought up?
Well, the sources paint a picture of real tension. Kennelly, the citizen's lawyer, urged the commissioners, hold off on the contract vote. Review this lawsuit we just served you.
Seems reasonable. What was the city attorney's response? Teresa Prince.
Her response kind of says it all about the atmosphere. She apparently said the lawsuit ruined her weekend.
Ruined her weekend, seriously.
And that she felt it was wrongly classified as an emergency.
Wow. Okay, that tells you a lot. It's not just procedural, it's personal, it's adversarial.
Deeply adversarial. The citizens weren't just filing papers. They were actively disrupting things, making it uncomfortable.
So legal action on one front. What else?
Connecting this to the bigger picture, the citizens knew a lawsuit alone might not be enough, or might take too long. They needed legislative protection, too.
So they went for their own ordinance.
Exactly. They launched a citizen-led initiative for Ordinance 2025-11.
And what would that ordinance do?
It aims to just flat-out prohibit paid parking in specific areas, the historic downtown, beaches, parks, unless...
Unless what?
Unless the majority of registered city voters approve it in a public referendum. 50% plus one vote.
So it takes the power away from the commission on this specific issue and gives it directly to the voters.
Precisely. A direct democratic check.
That seems like the clearest way to settle this, right? Put it to a vote. Did the city agree to do that quickly?
Well, that's where the timeline gets really controversial again.
Yep.
Vice Mayor Darren Askew apparently pleaded with the board. He said, essentially, let's hold this referendum before we implement paid parking. Settle the turmoil first.
Makes sense. Avoid months of fighting if the voters are just going to kill it anyway.
But the board voted against him. They decided to place the referendum on the ballot for August 18th, 2026.
August 2026. Wait. Implementation could start January 6, 2026.
Right.
But the citizens don't get to vote on whether they even want it until August 18th, 2026.
That's the timeline they set.
So potentially 7, almost 8 months of people being forced to pay for parking downtown before they get their democratic say on the system itself.
Yes. 7+ months of mandatory fees collected by the vendor under the city's contract before the public referendum happens.
That shows a certain willingness by the city to push this through, regardless of the pending vote, doesn't it?
It suggests they're willing to endure significant legal risk, political fallout, community anger, maybe banking on that revenue stream for those 7 months, even if it gets repealed later.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. Circling back to that data problem you mentioned.
The foundation of the whole plan.
The sources say the city did no demographic study of who is actually parking downtown now, is that right? No study.
Zero demographic study mentioned for the current parkers, which means they launched this whole thing without knowing who their customers are or how they'll react to price. They're flying blind on demand elasticity.
Demand elasticity. Okay, break that down simply for us.
It's just, how much will people's behavior change when the price changes? Specifically here, how likely are people to just stop parking downtown if they suddenly have to pay for it?
And the city didn't research this.
Apparently not. And the sources suggest they ignored or didn't account for several large groups who likely have very high demand elasticity.
Meaning groups very likely to stop coming or park elsewhere if charged.
Exactly. And if enough of these groups bail, that revenue projection just collapses instantly.
Okay, let's break down these high elasticity groups they seem to have missed. Who's first?
The sources identify downtown business owners and their employees as probably the most price sensitive.
Why them specifically?
Well, think about it. They park every day, often for long hours. They have fixed schedules. Can they suddenly afford, what, $5, $10, $15 a day just to go to work? Many likely can't or won't.
Right, they're the consistent long-term parkers in prime spots, if they leave.
Big hole in occupancy and revenue. Right behind them, the sources point to Amelia Island residents.
People who live on the island, but maybe not in the city proper?
Correct. Identified as the second group likely to show high elasticity. Why? Because they have options.
Options like what?
Like driving just 8 miles off island, over the bridge, to Yulee or mainland Nassau County, where they can get many of the same services, groceries, restaurants, shops, without paying for parking.
So why pay downtown if the alternative is free and not far away?
Exactly. That's demand elasticity in action.
Okay, business owners, employees, Amelia Island residents. Who else?
The broader group of Nassau County residents, people who live off island but might come downtown sometimes.
Similar logic.
Similar logic. They also have easy access to services outside the paid parking zone. If downtown becomes paid, they might just stick closer to home. These three groups shifting behavior could crater the revenue model.
But it's even more complicated than that, isn't it? What about the concessions they made?
Right. Like for city residents themselves, the plan proposes giving them 2 permits per household.
Permits for what?
Allowing 4 hours of free parking per day. It's clearly a political move to try and appease residents.
But financially, 4 hours free per day per household with permits.
It guarantees unpaid occupancy in the model, probably in the most desirable spots during peak times. That's revenue they definitely won't collect.
Okay. Then there are the groups specifically named in that RLUIPA lawsuit.
The ecclesial parkers, yes. Worshipals at the downtown churches. These are city residents, Amelia Island residents.
Their main impact is Sunday morning, right?
Primarily Sunday morning, but also potentially weekday evenings for other church functions. The RLUIPA claim is squarely aimed at the burden this fee places on their access.
Another group whose behavior might change significantly.
Definitely. And then there's a group that seems obvious, but maybe wasn't factored correctly. The property maintenance workers.
You mean like plumbers, electricians, construction crews?
Exactly. Landscapers, too. Think about it. They often need multiple spaces. One for the truck, maybe one for a trailer, sometimes even space for a dumpster.
And they can be there for days, weeks, sometimes months on a single job.
Precisely. They occupy multiple prime spots for extended periods. How does the model account for them? Will they pay commercial rates daily for multiple spots? It's a huge unknown variable impacting space, availability, and revenue.
And finally, the group that brings in outside money.
Tourists.
Perhaps the biggest unknown of all in terms of elasticity. You've got 2 main types identified.
Who are they?
First, the schools at vacationers. Families, people using the 500-plus licensed short-term rentals in the city during summer and holidays.
Okay. And second, the snowbirds. Winter visitors, often staying for longer periods. How will they react to paid parking? Will they just pay it? Will they spend less time downtown, go elsewhere?
Nobody knows because no study was done.
No study means the revenue model, the fix for the capital projects, it's all built on guesswork, especially regarding these crucial visitor groups. and those two initial data samples.
So pulling this all together, what does it really mean? What are we seeing here in Fernandina Beach?
Well, it looks like a classic collision course, doesn't it? You have clear fiscal pressure, the city needing money for projects.
Driving them towards a solution like paid parking.
Right. But that solution immediately triggers serious legal challenges, RLUIPA, First Amendment concerns.
Based on potentially discriminating against certain groups or burdening rights.
And it's all built on a foundation, that financial model, that seems to lack basic data about the very community it affects. The demographic blind spot is huge.
So the city pushed ahead anyway, approved the contract despite the lawsuit, despite the public outcry.
They chose the aggressive path, locked in the contract, aiming for that January 2026 start date.
Forcing those 7 months of paid parking before the citizens even get to vote in the August 2026 referendum.
It's a big gamble. They're wagering they can withstand the legal challenges and political heat for those 7 months, maybe hoping the revenue justifies it, or maybe hoping people just get used to it. It creates this incredibly volatile situation.
So if you're listening to this, what's the key takeaway, the learner's takeaway?
I think this case is a stark example of how local governments, under financial pressure, can try to shift burdens like funding capital improvements onto residents and visitors pretty quickly.
Through fees like paid parking.
Exactly. But it also shows how citizens aren't powerless. They have to be organized and use multiple tools at once.
Like we saw here, the legal challenges, pushing for their own ordinance, plus sustained public pressure, combining all those seemed crucial to fighting back.
It demonstrates the need for that multi-pronged approach to hold governance accountable.
Okay, that leads us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider.
Something to chew on after this.
Given the city's stated goal, funding those capital improvements, and knowing the flaws we discussed in their revenue model, the lack of data, the volatility, what practical alternative could the city have pursued? Something not mentioned in our sources today. An alternative to stabilize their finances before jumping to paid parking.
And maybe think about how choosing a different path first might have changed the whole dynamic, how it might have shifted those legal risks around religious freedom and constitutional rights.
Something for you to research, perhaps alternative ways municipalities stabilize revenue without immediately jumping to potentially controversial user fees.
A deep dive for another day, maybe.
Maybe so. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.